Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater, and today I'm really lucky to have Richard, the founder of Pittsburgh Modular, and he is here for Cre8audio.
Hi Daniel, it is so great to be here at Sweetwater talking to you about our new NiftyKEYZ from Cre8audio.
Yeah, I learned so much about this yesterday, and one of the most exciting things about a product is when I go, well, does it do that? Or does it do it this way? Or does it do it? And then the answer is yeah, or it does it both ways. Or yeah, we also do that, and you can do this. And it's astounding how much this keyboard, controller, and housing for Eurorack modulars is.
It was a lot of fun yesterday, and it was surprising how many times you were surprised. And I think today we're going to recreate that and show everybody else how surprising this instrument really is.
And on top of all of that, it's unbelievably affordable, which, you know, I've always found that the barrier to getting into Eurorack is that first purchase of the Eurorack itself is a pretty significant investment. And yet both the NiftyKEYZ and the NiftyKEYZ over there, just amazing price.
Well, we believe that synthesis is modular synthesis. And to offer something affordable that's also not intimidating is a great way to get into modular synthesis and really learn this stuff. So if you're a player, if you're a keyboard player, this is a perfect instrument because it's familiar. You're starting from a point where you already know. And if you're not a player like me, I play with 2 fingers, something like the NiftyKEYZ is perfect for me because I just go and I turn knobs. So wherever you need to start, there's a way in now.
So tell me about the basic specs of this thing.
Well, the NiftyKEYZ is a 112 HP Eurorack case, exactly, with a full MIDI keyboard built in. It has 4-channel MIDI to CV converters, so you can create a monophonic synth with this, a duophonic, up to a 4-voice poly synth. Today we have a 3-voice in here, but really the sky is the limit with what you can do with this as far as integrating modular synthesis with either a player, if you're a player, or if a full larger MIDI setup.
And I was really excited to find out that the keys were both Velocity, coming out of the Velocity output. It has channel aftertouch, again coming out of the aftertouch output. The mod wheel does LFO depth or a manual mode where it can just be straight 0 to max voltage. And then there's an expression input in the back, which then comes out here. So in real time, just having Velocity and aftertouch and mod wheel and expression, that's just a great way to get at all of this and to move different things at the same time.
It really is in the true spirit of modular synthesis. We wanted to make sure all the tools were there and that each tool not only was there, but was also flexible enough to really, you can fine tune it to you as a player. For the mod wheel, for instance, the mod wheel has your 0 to 5 volts out, which would be a standard mod wheel. You could use it for a filter cutoff or whatever you would need, but it also has a built-in LFO, so you could switch to LFO. So if you don't want to waste an LFO or you don't want to waste the HP in there to use an LFO, you switch it to LFO, and now you have an LFO. So that's one example of, there's multiple levels of this thing. So you start with it and everything does exactly what you would expect it to do coming from a standard MIDI keyboard, but then there's just layers beyond that.
And speaking of the layers, I'm looking at this cheat sheet to show just how many things are across the keyboard that you can do. For example, I mentioned that you can do the 3 octaves, but you can also do -1 more octave or +1 more octave than that. That's 5 octaves of choices within the switches plus a 4-octave keyboard. You can cover the entire range of MIDI.
You absolutely can, yeah. And that's going to cover, you know, because it's outputting not only MIDI information, but it's also outputting CV and gate information. So that gives you more voltage range out of your CV and gates.
And then the implication of that, of course, is if you bring MIDI into this, this whole thing can be simply a MIDI to control voltage converter for both pitch and gate and mod wheel and aftertouch and expression and all that. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, so as you start with this and as you expand to larger cases, this still remains the control center of your modular studio.
You know, you mentioned that you don't play with the keys as much as you play with the knobs. I get that, and that's certainly definitely a West Coast versus East Coast thing.
Sure.
But for me, as someone who plays keys and wants to move the knobs, this is brilliant because I can do this and move knobs without having to go to a module over here or over here. And to the same point, while I'm adjusting knobs, you've got this latch button, and it's my favorite kind of latch in that it has 2 different functions. So for example, when it's in the arpeggiator mode, I can hit some notes and it'll arpeggiate And when I hit new notes, it then jumps to those notes. It doesn't hold the old ones. But when the arpeggiator's off, it acts more like a sustain pedal where I could hit a note, make some adjustments, hit a second note, hit a third note, and then it'll all keep adding together.
It works the way you expect it to work.
Exactly.
It gets out of your way and lets you make music.
And since I'm talking about the arpeggiator, let's talk a little bit about the depth of the things you can do with that. You have a rate, but you can also lock the clock, and the rate becomes your unit of the beat. You have, I can see right up front here, all your choices. You have up, and down, as well as a random. And then sequencer, where normally I would expect that to be order, they call it. This is actually sequencer in that you literally can step time up to 16 steps.
32 steps.
It was 16 last night. It just jumped.
We've been busy.
So 32 steps. And then when that's running, you can transpose that with the keyboard, which is brilliant. I love that. I do not like something to always stay in the same key, and the ability to just instantly jump keys by hitting a new key is brilliant.
It turns what would be essentially a loop into something you can use in a song. And it is, obviously you can clock it with the internal clock, or you can clock it with external MIDI, and then that clock's available to all your other modules as well.
Yep, we got the control voltage clock out. And then you also have a reset. If you're using the internal clock, you can reset the clock, which is great, especially if you're jam syncing with other products.
Exactly.
And then just looking across the top, I see we've got 2 mults. I really like the graphics. And in fact, I should mention, I like all the graphics on this. You get a lot of information with just a little symbol. So I'm looking at triangle and ramp and sawtooth and square, and then you got a little guy going like this for random, which is brilliant. And then just something like I would not have expected at all, but this keyboard splits. Tell me a little bit about that.
The keyboard split is interesting because you can have it left for bass, right for lead. You can also have an arpeggiator on one side as you're playing the bass, or an arpeggiator in the low end and playing a lead with it. There's a lot of options. It really depends. We didn't want to have the keyboard be the limiting factor. It's really what you can patch together. The keyboard is going to help you with that.
And then way over to here, this is very exciting. You have auto chord. Tell me about that.
This might be the function for me. Okay. For someone that plays with one finger, I love the idea that you can pre-program a chord, so to speak, and then lock it in, and then you just sort of choose the root note, and it's going to transpose that chord for you.
And does it remember that if you turn it on and off?
All day long, yeah.
Perfect.
And of course, it's very easy then to change it if you want to switch to a different style chord or something else. Very quickly change it, and then it'll keep that in its mind.
So as I'm looking up here, I also see glide, and obviously that'll just do keyboard glide, lag processor. And then the function button, which I haven't talked about, but I've talked about the functions.
Sure.
But I really like how it works. So in this mode right now, it is your tempo light, but you touch it one time, and all you have to do, for example, if I wanted to change the arpeggiation mode, I touch it, and it's out again. Now it's back to being tempo. I don't have to go in, come out, and manually do it. I just hit the function, I do whatever the function is. You have a lot of them listed here. You have all the additional ones. I can see that most of the additional ones are things that you might only do once ever, or at least once per session, whereas these are things you could definitely do in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. The cheat sheet here, as you can see, it lines right up, but most of the functions on here you're never going to use. Everything that's pertinent to performing and using it is available right on here. This is the deeper stuff if you wanted to change the MIDI channel, or if you wanted to turn local on and off, if you're using it as a controller in a studio type situation. So that's stuff that you're not necessarily going to need on a day-to-day basis. But because it's so logically laid out, it's intuitive to use.
And I mentioned the mults, but tell me a little more specifically about them.
A mult is something, if you're new to modular synthesis, you're going to use every day, all day long. It just takes one patch cable and turns it into 2 in this case. So for instance, if we had an LFO that we wanted to patch to, say, 2 different filter cutoffs, you could very easily just patch the LFO into here and then take those 2 outputs and go into each of the filter cutoff. It just makes one thing 2 things. So we have 2 of those built in. If you needed 1 to 3, you could just chain them together and use it for 3. So in that case, we would take, say, the wavefold of our Capt'n Big O oscillators here. We could take an LFO out and then go each into the folds of those. So you can control 3 different things with one controller, which is really nice in a sense like this. If you're doing a polyphonic synth, instead of turning the filter cutoff of all 3 knobs, you simply route the output of, say, the mod wheel to the filter cutoff, and that allows you to use one controller for multiple destinations.
And then the output jacks over here are really clever in that you could take two audio sources, combine them, and you come out of the 3.5 millimeter, but it also comes out of the 1/4 inch, which can be sometimes a challenge in Eurorack because I don't like using the adapters. They fail on you, and you never have enough of those 3.5 millimeter 1/4 inch, and then they're not long enough. You just have real, genuine TS unbalanced outs from there, as well as 1/4 inch for your sustain and expression. And the MIDI are real 5-pinned in. I don't have to have little breakout cables for that. And although you have them on modules, it's really great to be able to just do that on this end with 5-pinned in.
It is. It just frees this area up for your creative patching. It takes the sort of business side of it and leaves it over there and opens this up. It gives you as many options as you want then. You know, the two inputs to the outs, that sounds confusing, but it really isn't. So we have a mixer going to each of the left and the right output. That just opens up the creativity. You always inevitably, in your rack, you always want one more thing. And you know, we try to make our modules as deep as possible so you can always, with a little clever patching, get that one more. So this is an extension of that. We've added that one extra level to this. So you do have a unity gain mixer going to each the left and the right outputs. You also have an independent headphone volume from the main volume, which can be used for headphones, obviously, but it can be used creatively as well. You can do the old trick of you take that 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch cable, you patch that in here, and then just reroute it back in. Now you have a feedback loop.
Or it could be an effects send.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really
Absolutely.
cool. And just of things you would never expect to be in a Eurorack case is final volume out and headphone out built into this thing.
HP, which is how we measure the space a Eurorack module takes up, is precious. Once you get into Eurorack, you understand you want all the space you can have for your modules. So anything we could take out of that that's gonna help it, but isn't necessarily part of the sound design, it gets it out of the way. You have more room for sound design, more room for modules that make sounds.
And just fewer cables too. And so I'm a live player, which is what makes this very exciting for me because I have keys, I got knobs, I got aftertouch, I got expression, I got velocity. I have lots of ways to move all this stuff. But other people who are more DAW based, they're really going to appreciate the fact that the USB is MIDI in and out as well as the 5-pinned in. So all of this, including what you're doing with control voltage and everything, it's control voltage here, but you're storing it as MIDI on that end. And so then you can send it back as MIDI.
Yep.
And you're getting the precision on that end and easy editing of MIDI instead of looking at control voltages and trying to manipulate that. So it's just a great interface to DAW as well as for live players.
It makes the DAW modular. It makes the DAW modular.
And because all of the controllers, again, the velocity and the aftertouch and the expression and the mod wheel and the pitch wheel, because all of that both sends and receives MIDI over the USB, all of that can be done in separate takes or separate tracks or separate passes after you've done the notes. Now you can go back and do another track of controller information.
Yeah, it's cool because you're a player and it's been a pleasure to listen to you play over the last, because I can't play this thing, so it's great to listen to someone play it. It's been super cool. But you only have two hands. To be able to record your performance via MIDI, where you can edit it or tweak it or reorganize it and then play it back and then really dig in and really do sound design over your performance is just that extra added level.
And I know that YouTube is only one way, but somehow I can already hear people screaming, when are you going to play this thing? So we should start playing it now.
I think we should.
So now I've got it in a one voice mode, which means that a single key strike is sending both gate and control voltage out of all four of these outputs, which is very cool. I could just take them out of one, but I could take them out of all four, which means in real time I can go from one voice to two voice to three voice to four voice if I had four oscillators going. So right now we're only hearing one oscillator. It's the Capt'n Big O. It is both big and fat. And then I'm going to bring in second oscillator. And a third.
And this patch, it looks complicated because you have all the spaghetti going on here, which is standard for your rack, but really it's a very simple patch. If we break it down to 3 voices, they're all identical. So we have Capt'n Big O here making the big beefy square waves, and that's patched into our Mr. Filter, and that's running the filter, the VCA, and the envelope for the voice. So really, each voice is, each voice here is only 2 modules and going into a mixer.
That and that and that, and that's just triplicated.
Exactly. And in the modular world, that is polyphony. You want 3 voices, you use 3 oscillators. You want 3 you got 3 filters here. Modular looks complicated, again, with all this patch, but when you break it down, you think about it, it's really 3 very simple things stacked to give you the complexity you need.
So now, having played with 1 voice mode, now I'm going to go into 3 voice mode, and it really is simple as function, 3 voice. And now I should be able to play chords, which I can, right? If I wanted all of them, for example, to respond with velocity, I could come out, go into a mult, and I could even take the mult into a mult and have 3 separate velocities going to each of the 3 filter cutoffs. So with this patch of mod LFO going into the mults, going to the 3 filters, this is a really cool demonstration of how the mod wheel can both be a manual control and an LFO depth control. So here it is manual. And then with 1 button push, that's an LFO now. And as we talked about before, the pitch bend can be either 2 half steps, a whole step, or an octave. And so I'm going to take the same thing with latch on and the arpeggiator going. The same thing, just because I'm me, throwing a little bit of stereo ping pong delay just to show what that sounds like. So I'll do the same thing, but instead of the sawtooth wave for the LFO, I'm going to hit function and random.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
could, and I have been known to listen to that all day.
You're a boops and bleeps guy. Clearly, the NiftyKEYZ is an amazing way to start with your Eurorack gear. It's a great way to gather it all together, to have all of the control of keyboard and velocity and aftertouch and expression and mod wheel and pitch and sustain. With your internal clocks, you got an arpeggiator, you got a sequencer, and all of that plus 112 HP space. And at this price, it's just the perfect tool to gather everything you're doing with Eurorack.
Yeah, Cre8audio really knocked it out of the park with this one. Thank you, Daniel, for having me here. It's been an absolute pleasure.
This is very cool. And if you have any questions about NiftyKEYZ or the NiftyKEYZ, any of the Cre8audio or Pittsburgh Modular products, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching.